This Iron Age mythology still holds sway. It teaches that sex is to be preserved for a heterosexual church-sanctioned marriage. Procreation is the main goal. And learning about how our bodies function naturally is just wrong. Let's put religion out of its misery now. If you are an atheist, tell a friend. Explain to them why you've given up belief in God and how you are living a perfectly normal, moral life without Him.
Welcome to the Women Beyond Belief podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Marsman. Dr. Karen Garst is the author of the book entitled Women Beyond Belief, Discovering Life Without Religion. Karen's book is a collection of personal essays from 22 women from diverse backgrounds who tell their stories of leaving religion. Karen also has a blog which can be found at faithlessfeminist.com. This podcast episode is the 6th in a series where Karen records the audio version of her blog articles. In this first section, she reads a guest post by Valerie Tarico, author of Trusting Doubt and blogger at valerietarico.com. Valerie gives an insightful analysis of the treatment of women in the Bible and early Christianity. She outlines 15 Bible verses that treat women as inferior and then discusses the implications of fundamentals who still cling to these verses as the inerrant voice of God. And in the second section of this episode, Karen reads one of her own essays where she talks about sex education that she didn't have and its impact on her. These feminist authors challenge the status quo, and I'm sure you will learn some new insights from this episode. Thanks so much for listening.
My name is Karen Garst, and I have a blog at www.faithlessfeminist.com. Today, I am reading a guest post by Valerie Tarico. It is entitled, 15 Bible Texts Reveal Why God's Own Party is at War with Women. Why can't GOP politicians trumpet their religious credentials without assaulting women? Because fundamentalist religion of all stripes has degradation of women at its core. Progressive Christians believe that the Bible is a human document, a record of humanity's multi-millennial struggle to understand what is good and what is God and how to live in moral community with each other. But fundamentalists believe that the Bible is the literally perfect word of the Almighty, essentially dictated by God to the writers. To believe that the Bible is the perfect word of God is to believe that women are tainted seductresses who must be controlled by men. Listen to early church father Tertullian, and I quote, "You," meaning woman, "are the devil's gateway. You are the unsealer of that forbidden tree. You are the first deserter of the divine law. You are she who persuaded him whom the devil was not valiant enough to attack. You destroyed so easily God's image, man. On account of your desert, that is, death, even the Son of God had to die." Or take it from Reformer John Calvin, and I quote, "Woman is more guilty than man because she was seduced by Satan and so diverted her husband from obedience to God that she was an instrument of death leading to all perdition. It is necessary that woman recognize this and that she learn to what she is subjected, and not only against her husband. This is reason enough why today she is placed below and that she bears within her ignominy and shame." Both Tertullian, a respected Catholic theologian, and Calvin, a leader of the Protestant Reformation, took their cues on this matter from the book of Genesis 3:16. "To the woman, God said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." No matter how outrageous Santorum and Gingrich may seem to secularists and moderate people of faith, they are right on target for an intended audience of Bible-believing fundamentalists. If you have any doubt, check out these 15 Bible passages. Number 1, A wife is a man's property. Exodus 20:17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything belongs to your neighbor. 2. Daughters can be bought and sold. Exodus 21:7. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. Number 3. A raped daughter can be sold to her rapist. Deuteronomy 22:28-29. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. 4. Collecting wives and sex slaves is a sign of status. He, meaning Solomon, had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. This is quoted from 1 Kings 11:3. 5. Used brides deserve death. This is from Deuteronomy 22:20-21. If, however, the charge is true, and no proof of the girl's virginity can be found, she shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of her town shall stone her to death. 6. Women, but only virgins, are to be taken as spoils of war. Numbers 31:17-18. Now kill all the boys, and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. 7. Menstruating women are spiritually unclean. This is from Leviticus 15:19-31. When a woman has a regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. Anything she lies on during her period will be unclean, and anything she sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches her bed will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. Anyone who touches anything she sits on will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water. The priest is to sacrifice one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. In this way, he will make atonement for her before the Lord for the uncleanliness of her discharge. You must keep the Israelites separate from things that make them unclean, so they will not die in their uncleanliness for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them. 8. A woman is twice as unclean after giving birth to a girl as to a boy. A woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the 8th day, the boy is to be circumcised. Then the woman must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred or go to the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over. If she gives birth to a daughter, for 2 weeks the woman will be unclean, as during her period. Then she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding. When the days of her purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering and a young pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. Leviticus 12:1-8. A woman's promise is binding only if her father or husband agrees. When a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything he said. When a young woman still living in her father's household makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge, but says nothing to her, then all her vows and every pledge by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her father forbids her when he hears about it, none of her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. The Lord will release her because her father has forbidden her. A woman's vow is meaningless unless approved by her husband or father. But if her husband nullifies them when he hears about them, then none of the vows or pledges that came from her lips will stand. Her husband has nullified them, and the Lord will release her. Her husband may confirm or nullify any vow she makes or any sworn pledge to deny herself. Numbers 30:1-16. Number 10. Women should be seen, not heard. Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. 1 Corinthians 14:34. 11. Wives should submit to their husbands' instructions and desires. Wives, submit yourself to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Colossians 3:18. 12. In case you miss that submission thing, Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Ephesians 5:22-24. 13. More submission and childbearing as a form of atonement. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety. 1 Timothy 2:11-15. Women were created for men. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. 1 Corinthians 11:2-10. 15. Sleeping with women is dirty. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remain virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as firstfruits to God and the Lamb. Revelation 14:3-4. This list is just a sampling of the Bible verses that either instruct or illustrate proper relationships between men and women. In context, they often are mixed among passages that teach proper relationships with children, slaves, and foreigners. The Bible doesn't forbid either contraception or abortion, but it is easy to see why Bible-believing fundamentalists might have negative feelings about both. As futurist Sarah Robinson has pointed out, traditional roles that govern male-female relationships are grounded more in property rights than civil rights. Men essentially have ownership of women whose lives are scripted to serve an end, bearing offspring. It is very important to men that they know whose progeny they are raising, so sexual morality has focused primarily on controlling women's sex activity and maintaining their purity and value as assets. Traditional gender roles and rules evolved on the presumption that women don't have control over their fertility. In other words, modern contraception radically changed a social compact that had existed for literally thousands of years. Some people don't welcome change. Since the beginnings of the 20th century, fundamentalist Christians have been engaged in what they see as spiritual warfare against secularists and modernist Christians. Both of their forces have embraced discoveries in fields such as linguistics, archaeology, psychology, biology, and physics, all of which call into question the heart of conservative religion and culture. Biblical scholars now challenge such fundamentals as a historical Adam, the virgin birth, the resurrection, and the special status that Abraham's God gave to straight males. Fundamentalists are fighting desperately to hang on to certainties and privileges they once saw as an Abrahamic birthright. If they can't keep women in line, it's all over. The future ends up in the hands of cultural creatives, scientists, artists, inquiring minds, and girl. It's horrifying. All verses are quoted from the New International Version of the Bible, a favorite of evangelicals. The title is, You Can't Be Pregnant, I Didn't Come. His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. 1,000 thoughts rushed into my head. How could I not know this? He must think I'm a moron. Why didn't I get a test instead of calling him? I remember lowering my head and saying very softly into the phone, "Oh, I didn't know." The reasons I didn't know are pretty simple on the surface. No one ever explained to me what happened when you had sex. Not my mother, not my father, not my older sister, and not my friends. To make matters worse, there was no sex education of any kind in public schools in the 60s in North Dakota. My mother certainly had the chance to explain things to me. When we went to the zoo and I asked, "Why are the llamas riding piggyback?" when I ran into the house in 5th grade shouting, "What's menstruation?" at the top of my lungs after seeing the Girls movie. She did explain the female parts, but held back on the male ones. By the way, I never shouted that word in the house again. Maybe when I started my period would have been a good time. Maybe when I turned 18 and went off to college. Instead, here is how I gleaned the little knowledge I had. I read Harold Robbins' 79 Park Avenue, stolen from my sister's room. In this novel, a young girl gets raped by a store owner. Oh, that's what intercourse is. I hung out in the bathroom longer than necessary at my cousin's to read the Playboy magazines. This same boyfriend and I had played around a few months earlier before I left for 6 months in Paris. Oh, that's what a clitoris is. That's what it means to masturbate. Let me try this. What a long way we've come from our species' early beginnings, where sex was a natural phenomenon without any taboos associated with it. Women were revered because of what their bodies did, produce new members of the tribe. Thousands of female figurines carved out of hard stone had to mean some kind of reverence for women. And imagine the wonder that resulted as they learned that women's menstrual cycles matched those of the moon. How cool is that? But that changed over thousands of years of man creating religions, ending up with a book that proclaimed only one God, a male. From the earliest chapters of the Old Testament, this new monotheist God put woman to shame. Blamed for accepting a piece of fruit from a snake, banished from paradise, saddled with pain in childbirth, it was not a good beginning. Later, woman's normal bodily functions would make her unclean and banned from any duties in the temple. If the writings in the Bible were not enough, early church leaders took a particular pleasure in denouncing the female sex. And do you not know that you are each an Eve? The sentence of God on this sex of yours lives in this age, the guilt much of necessity too. You are the devil's gateway. You are the unsealer of that forbidden tree. You are the first deserter of the divine law. You are she who persuaded him, Adam, whom the devil was not valiant enough to attack. You destroyed so easily God's image, man. On account of your desert, that is death, even the Son of God had to die. Is it any wonder that this tradition, so intricately woven into our culture, avoided any discussion of what a natural process human sexual intercourse really is? And thanks to the stories in the New Testament, the only woman held in high esteem by Christianity was a virgin mother. Great, that's really something a girl could aspire to. Isn't it time for women to say no to this teaching, to this book written by men? A book where men are always in charge? Why cling to an Iron Age story of some male sky god and give up any notion of a female divine? Because it is right? Please. How can this story win out over all the other thousands of religions? Talking donkeys, hundreds of people rising out of graves at the crucifixion, cities destroyed at the whim of God. How can anyone buy in this today? They shouldn't any more than they should buy into the flying spaghetti monster. But this Iron Age mythology still holds sway. It teaches that sex is to be preserved for a heterosexual church-sanctioned marriage. Procreation is the main goal. And learning about how our bodies function naturally is just wrong. The Real Education for Healthy Youth Act sits idle before Congress last year in 2016. This act requires a medically accurate, logical, rational sex education program in public schools. Will this bill pass? Unlikely. Instead, Congress puts millions of dollars into abstinence-only sex education. While we like to claim separation of church and state, too many in Congress grew up just like I did, in the throes of God worship. A God worship that teaches that men must be virgins when they marry, a rule that harkens back to women and children being the man's property. To assure he knows if the baby is his, the woman must be a virgin and adultery is taboo. Even those students who experience abstinence-only sex education have sex almost as often as those who do not, we still refuse to teach people about their bodies. This has to stop. I cannot express to you how I felt when my fiancé, by the way, he dumped me after this call and never saw him again in my life, said those words to me. I was a bright, intelligent woman, totally unaware of my body and its functions, at least those functions that had anything to do with sex. Let's put religion out of its misery now. If you are an atheist, tell a friend. Explain to them why you've given up belief in God and how you are living a perfectly normal, moral life without Him. Let's not wait 50 years to catch up with Europe. Let's do it today. Let's not call ourselves nuns or humanists or secularists. Let's call ourselves atheists and wear the title with pride.
Thanks so much for listening to this 6th episode in the series of audio blogs by Karen Garst. You can read both of these blog articles, as well as numerous other ones, at her website at faithlessfeminist.com. This Women Beyond Belief podcast can be heard directly from the website at womenbeyondbelief.com, from iTunes, from YouTube, and from Stitcher. If you would like to assist me in the cost of producing this podcast, please go to the website and click on the page titled Contribute. Or you can go directly to Patreon. You can contribute through monthly support via Patreon or one-time donation through PayPal. I'm so thankful for everyone who has contributed so far. I want to thank Leslie and David Sohan, Dorothy, Sarah, Jason, Julie, Isles, and Sheila. Your financial help has helped me cover the cost of web hosting, media hosting, Skype recording programs, and graphic design. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to having a bit more finances in the future to dedicate more time to this podcast. I would love to be able to interview more women each month, and I'm very interested in building a team to organize a Women's Atheist Conference in the future. Please send me an email if you're interested in helping with this initiative. My email address is womenbeyondbelief@gmail.com. I'm thankful to my daughter Esther Nicholson, who has composed and produced the theme music for this podcast. It's so exciting to hear how this podcast is reaching so many people and helping women have a voice as women who are beyond belief.